Farm Week is a production of the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
Today on Farm Week, the Mississippi River is closed due to low water, and there is a concern that a lot of this fall's harvest will end up piled up on the ground because it can't be moved south.
Growers find out about dry land crop research at the North Farm of Mississippi State University.
In today's Southern Gardening, the sun coleus. There are many colors to choose from, and they don't have to hide in the shade.
In the markets, grain prices are jolted by worse than expected crops in a private survey, as a cattle report forecasts tighter supplies down the road.
In the feature segment, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is 150 years old. Abraham Lincoln started it and called it the People's Department. I believe he didn't know the influence it would have in the future.
I think he would be amazed how few people in this country produce as much food as they produce. We are food secure as a nation in large part because of the productivity of American farmers and ranchers and producers.
Good day, everyone. I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Artis Ford. Welcome to Farm Week.
A section of the Mississippi River is closed due to low water.
Leighton, 100 barge tows are estimated to be waiting for passage on an 11-mile section of the river near Greenville, Mississippi. The last time the river was closed was in the same area 24 years ago. This will pose problems for moving even a drought-reduced harvest to the rest of the world. Market to Market's Mike Pearson reports.
The great drought of 2012 has left its mark on farms across rural America. The lack of water decimated crops all over the Corn Belt, prompting producers to seek alternatives. Now the shortage of water is causing a new problem: low river levels. Most significantly impacted is the mighty Mississippi River, a main shipping channel for nearly $180 billion in commodities.
90% of all the grain is transferred by the river. They get it to the river in silos, then they pump it on the barges, and then they travel up and down the Mississippi River. Without the river being navigable for the boats and stuff that travel up and down the river, that grain don't get there.
Less than a year ago, parts of the Mississippi contended with record flooding.
Our shops on the Louisiana side were all underwater, a foot and a half over the roof, and this year we're in a drought situation.
Now sandbars line the banks at Vicksburg, Mississippi.
And now we are about 2 feet on the Vicksburg gauge, so you can do the math and know that we are about 55 to 56 feet difference from this time last year as today.
Much of the 2,500-mile Mississippi watershed is experiencing the worst drought in 50 years. Barges and their tows are running aground in some shallow places of the river. Those making it through the tight spots are having to lighten their cargoes and slow down. Hoping to clear the river for commercial traffic, the Army Corps of Engineers is dredging the channel of silt caused by last year's epic flooding.
We're breaking records with the water being as low as it is this year, and partially of that is last year's flood put a lot of silt in places they're usually not. So, and the river being so low is what we got to dredge out.
The dredges are removing 52,000 cubic yards of sand per day, or about the size of a football field stacked with 16 feet of debris. The goal is to deepen the channel's current single-digit level to a more normal stage of 18 to 20 feet.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers says the worst is still ahead. Mississippi River levels traditionally hit their lowest point in October.
Less extreme temperatures are helping soybean rust to spread in Mississippi. Soybean farmers with young soybeans are cautioned to take appropriate control measures. Soy rust was found in 3 more Mississippi counties in the last week. It was found in a kudzu patch in Winston County and commercial soybean fields in Lowndes and Noxubee counties. That makes a total of 11 counties so far in Mississippi where soybean rust has been discovered. Crop research in Mississippi being performed by MSU scientists is not limited to just branch experiment stations and research and extension centers. It's also taking place close to the main campus of Mississippi State University. An agronomic crops field day this summer at the R.R. Foyle Plant Science Research Center highlighted the work taking place in Starkville involving Mississippi's main crops. Seed treatment trials in corn were among the many demonstration plots on display on what is commonly referred to as North Farm at MSU. The use of air-conditioned shuttle buses to transport visitors marked a departure from the normal field day routine, although open wagons were still used on the adjacent Andrews Agricultural Systems Research Farm that day. The Andrews area of the North Farm featured fertility trials as well as test plots focusing on weed resistance research. Scientists say the environment of the test plots in the Andrews area most closely replicates what farmers deal with in the hill region of North Mississippi during the growing season.
This is one of the spots on the farm that is totally dry land. So this really fits probably 90% of just like the producers have in North Mississippi. It's very similar to their soil types and mimics the problems that they have. And we're trying to do the research to provide them answers so they're more profitable.
This was the first field day on the North Farm area of the main campus in several years.
The coleus used to be limited to shade gardens in the South. In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Extension Horticulturist Dr. Gary Bachman shows us some of the beautiful new coleus that can be grown in the full sun.
Coleus has moved from being an obscure shade plant to a popular plant that thrives in our Mississippi summer sun. Trial sites like the South Mississippi Branch Station in Poplarville let gardeners see the latest creations. Through the efforts of plant breeders, coleus colors have become rich with highly variegated selections. With a growing season from spring to frost in the fall, coleus belong in every garden and landscape. Great sun coleus selections for your landscape include yellow and red Fiesta Cherry, dark purple and lime green Solarset, finely lobed burgundy and gold kiwi fruit, and the lime and chartreuse Mississippi Medallion winner Electric Lime. While most coleus have an upright growth habit, there are some selections that have a spreading growth habit like trailing rose, with burgundy leaves and chartreuse colored edges. This would make a fine and colorful ground cover. When several selections are planted together, like in these trial beds, the landscape can take on a carnival-like atmosphere. To keep coleus producing the boldly colored foliage, be sure to pinch off flower heads. Many of the new selections, like coleus cranberry salad, are very slow to produce flowers, if at all. Coleus has undergone a remarkable breeding transformation. They're foolproof landscape plants and provide vibrant color all season long. Try some in your landscape. I'm Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Gary says in colder areas the coleus isn't annual, but it can be grown as a perennial in warmer climates. In the feature segment today, Abraham Lincoln is this country's most admired president for the way he handled the Civil War. He should also be remembered for starting one of the most influential government departments in the world, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Time now for the Marcus with Layton, and today you say there's an interesting substitute for corn in cattle rations.
Very interesting. One rancher's interesting answer to pricey grain, that is coming up a bit later. Also ahead this week, demand for corn may fall as prices continue to rise. Wheat may get a second selling opportunity, and the government forecasts that cattle supplies will tighten. The annual Pro Farmer Crop Tour in the Midwest has been providing much of the news driving grains this week. And the news is worse than expected crop damage from the drought. Analyst Darren Newsom says that while this continues to support the market and high prices, there is a problem.
The problem corn's going to have in pushing significantly higher is that demand's going to come down as well. It's one of those markets that we can continue to whittle away demand. We've already seen it happen in the feed. We've seen export business slow down, not only because of our price, not only because of our lack of supplies, but the river problems are also hurting our movement to ports. So demand for corn could continue to come down. So I think that's going to limit the possibility of gains. But if we look on out to the new crop, I would not get too excited about making 2013 sales right now, because we're going to see a fight next year over some dry acres, and both corn and beans are going to be high priced, and they're going to be fighting for those acres. We're going to still see a potential for not only this year's crop but next year's crop to still put some higher numbers on the board.
Meanwhile, some analysts think the month of August offers potential as a time to sell some wheat. Trader John Roach explains why he personally thinks there is opportunity for wheat producers.
The month of August, when we tend to move the wheat market up and get kind of a second selling opportunity. It's kind of the first rally after harvest in most years. And so when we go back and look at a lot of history, August is a decent month to be selling in. And then after this month, then you have to go all the way out into February. And so we think that our hope is that the market doesn't fall very far, and that we have an opportunity on a rally here to get whatever sales need to be made during this time frame.
Earlier in our program, you saw the update on the low water levels in the Mississippi River. Well, here's a river-related trivia question for you. How much of the nation's grain is transported by barge on the Mississippi River? Is it 60%, or 50%, or 40%, or 30%? You'll find out in a few more minutes.
We're going to pause for a short break on Farm Week. Coming up, we'll look at the calendar in the second part of the markets. Leighton Spann reports cattle supplies are tightening. In the feature segment today, the USDA turns 150 years old. Abraham Lincoln started it. What would he think of it today?
Committed? Absolutely. People rely on me. I don't take that lightly. Sure, sometimes we get out of sync and things feel forced. That's when the commitment kicks in. You buckle down, hammer it out, and keep it together for everybody involved. So, yeah, I'm completely committed to my marriage. Till death do us part. Commit to your marriage.
Now, before we get back to the markets, let's look at the Farm Week calendar. The North Mississippi Peanut Field Day takes place August 29th. That's a Wednesday. The location will be the Mark and John Agostinelli Farm. That's near Clarksdale. Follow the signs and turn on New Africa Road, then turn on Monty Martin Road for the field day site. Many aspects of peanut management will be covered, and a harvest demonstration will take place. The third annual Mississippi Gourd Festival is Saturday and Sunday, September 15th and 16th. The location is the Smith County Agricultural Complex at Raleigh. Registration is $2. Children 12 and under are free. All sorts of classes on growing gourds and decorating gourds will be held. Painting, carving, wood burning, you name it, you'll see it there. Early bird classes will start Friday afternoon. Go to the Mississippi Gourd Association website to find out more and to sign up for the classes. We'll have a link on our Farm Week calendar. Go to our Farm Week website at farmweek.msucares.com for information on these and other events. Now check out this week's Farm Week Snapshot.
The government's monthly cattle on feed update came out fairly close to the pre-report expectations. However, it does project tighter supplies in coming months. I talked with Extension Ag economist John Michael Riley late Thursday morning. So John Michael, does this new on-feed report document the herd liquidation or culling that we continue to hear about in the beef sector?
It does in some respects. It's a very interesting report in a lot of ways, and we'll get into some of that. But just under 10.7 million head of cattle on feed. This is on par with where we were at last year, and it was exactly what the pre-report expectations were for the number of cattle on feed. Placement's down pretty hard, down 10% compared to 2011, but you got to keep that in perspective because it was during the July of last year that Texas and the Southwest was in such an extreme drought and so many cattle were being placed on feed that the July placements of 2011 were the highest on record for that month. So you're comparing it to a really high water mark. If you look at that placements number compared to the average, 5-year average stopping at 2010, we're actually about 20% above that number. So still very high placements, but down from a year ago. Marketings were just under where we're at last year, and actually on the low end of pre-report expectations. So not as many cattle marketed during the month of July. A lot of folks say the heat kept people from hitting the grill. Didn't stop me, but I can see how it could stop others.
All right, and speaking of grills, of course, right now when we talk about box beef and other sectors, of course, retailers are all geared up and I guess have made their purchases as far as Labor Day.
You've seen that with the box beef price. Box beef price has just been skyrocketing here lately, which is typical for this time of year, but it's been a very good event take place because those prices had been getting beat down pretty hard. Okay, and as far as the outlook here and where we go, we're talking about continued high grain feed prices, and we're in this trend of declining supplies, no doubt. That's true, and that was another interesting point of the report, is that if you look in Texas, the placements were down pretty hard compared to a year ago because that's where so many cattle were placed. In Nebraska, though, where this drought is so much more widespread this year than typical, placements were actually up pretty hard on the light cattle and heavy cattle. So I think now the question is, do we keep cattle on grass that's not there, or do we put them in a feedlot and feed them essentially gold bars? So, and that's just the question that I think we don't know the answer to yet. We don't know what that's going to do. Corn is so high, it's hard to justify putting them on feed, but there's a lot of cattle out there that need to go. So what that's going to do for the rest of this year is the interesting thing moving forward. A lack of forage and high feed prices has forced many U.S. beef producers to cull their herds. This in turn brought down calf and feeder cattle prices. But Purdue Extension economist Chris Hurt says there is a silver lining to this situation. Producers who locked in lower feed prices back in the spring, he says, should be able to hold on to their cows. And Hurt thinks that short-term losses in the next year should be replaced by large profits in late 2013 and beyond as cattle numbers fall below consumer demand for beef. So what about producers who didn't lock in feed back in the spring when it was cheaper? Well, Joseph Watson of Mayfield, Kentucky is using old candy in place of expensive corn for his cattle feed. CNN reports Watson is mixing secondhand salvage candy with an ethanol byproduct and a mineral nutrient and feeding it to the cattle. The producer says he is balancing the ration to not have too much fat in it. Watson reports the cows are gaining weight and not showing any health problems, and he's not spending money on expensive corn. Well, we're about out of time now for the markets. Here's that trivia answer just ahead of the feature story. This week, A is correct. 60% of the nation's grain is transported on the Mississippi River.
In the feature segment today, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This year, the USDA is celebrating its 150th anniversary. President Abraham Lincoln signed the USDA into being in May 1862. In his last annual speech to the Congress, he dubbed it the People's Department. Mark DeMarcus John Nichols reports how the USDA has changed since it was started.
1 year into the Civil War, additional Union troops were rushed to Washington, D.C. to protect the nation's capital from rapidly advancing Confederate forces. With his back against the wall, President Abraham Lincoln struggled to unite a bitterly divided nation. A peculiar time, it would seem, for the president to focus on agriculture. Yet that's exactly what Lincoln did, signing legislation in May of 1862, creating what he later called the People's Department.
You know, I think if Abraham Lincoln came back and saw what he began, he would be extraordinarily proud. I'm not sure he would recognize his USDA. We started out 150 years ago with a very narrow responsibility. That was the function. Today, we do so much more.
When the Agriculture Department was created in 1862, the United States population was estimated at 31 million people. Nearly half of all Americans lived on farms, and about 90% were connected directly or indirectly to agriculture. 150 years later, the population has increased more than tenfold. Less than 2% of us live on farms, yet Americans enjoy access to abundant and affordable food. And USDA continues to fulfill Lincoln's vision of touching the lives of every American every day.
The most important thing about USDA from my perspective is its reach. it really does affect every single American every single day, and it also impacts millions of people all around the world.
At no time in history did the USDA play a more crucial role in sustaining the nation than during the Great Depression. In the wake of a stock market crash that vaporized an estimated $30 billion in equity, wages declined and unemployment soared. Between 1929 and 1932, the average worker's income fell by 40%, sparking a firestorm of home foreclosures. By 1934, over 1 million families had lost their farms. Those remaining on the land endured severe drought that persisted for years, yet commodity prices plummeted. On the southern plains, clouds of dust darkened the skies for weeks in a phenomenon that came to be known as the Dust Bowl. USDA worked with growers to minimize soil erosion, and the conservation programs that conquered the Dust Bowl have played a key role in American agriculture ever since.
So I'm proud to say that in this administration we have a record number of acres engaged and enrolled in conservation practices of one kind or another. All of this designed to avoid soil erosion. We're looking at about 29 million acres. $1.8 billion of money goes into the pockets of farmers because of that program, and it allows us to prevent the kind of circumstances we saw during the Depression.
In addition to environmental challenges, America's farmers also faced severe economic hardships during the Depression. USDA established marketing programs and price supports designed to stabilize the agricultural economy. But rural citizens still lacked a vital piece of infrastructure that was powering a renaissance in urban America: electricity. In the 1930s, only about 10% of rural homes were wired for electrical power, compared to 90% coverage in urban areas. USDA's Rural Electrification Administration, or REA, tackled the problem in 1935. 7 years later, nearly 50% of U.S. farms were energized, and by 1952, electricity was available to virtually every operation in the country. Urban citizens, of course, also suffered during the Depression, and as the worst economic downturn in history intensified, 2 million Americans were homeless and hungry. The Agriculture Department assisted the needy by distributing surplus food. To better nourish impoverished children, USDA established what would become the National School Lunch Program. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, also traces its roots to the Depression. All told, the Agriculture Department administers more than a dozen domestic nutrition programs, and the Congressional Budget Office estimates that more than 80% of USDA spending over the next decade will be for nutrition, while direct spending for agriculture is expected to account for less than 20%. But Vilsack stresses the symbiotic relationship of both campaigns.
14, 16 cents, depending upon the study that you look at, of every dollar that's spent in a grocery store ends up in a farmer's pocket. And so when people are suggesting huge cuts in the nutrition programs as a way of dealing with our fiscal challenges, farmers need to understand that's going to take money out of their pockets.
Other USDA agencies manage America's national forests, enforce food safety regulations, and support the development of homegrown energy.
In the last 3 years, we've doubled the amount of renewable energy generation in this country. And so the president has been very clear about this. This is the future. This is the future. And so a production tax credit will make sure that we continue to see a wind energy industry in the Midwest and across the country. We'll continue to support solar. We'll continue to support geothermal. We'll continue to support biofuel production. Why? Because it gives us more options. It diversifies our energy portfolio. It makes us more secure. It creates jobs, and it creates wealth and income for farmers.
Perhaps USDA's most crucial program for producers is the safety net, designed to better insulate farmers and ranchers from losses due to weather, market downturns, or other unexpected issues. And by continuing its work in agricultural research, the People's Department also fulfills the vision of its founder, Abraham Lincoln.
We're still in the research business because ag productivity is key to everything else we do. But I think he would be impressed with the fact that we now have record exports, American agricultural products going all over the world. I think he would be amazed how few people in this country produce as much food as they produce. We are food secure as a nation in large part because of the productivity of American farmers and ranchers and producers. It's a great department. I have been extraordinarily privileged and honored to be part of it, and I think Abe would be pretty pleased with what we're doing.
For Market to Market, I'm John Nichols.
You can watch this story again on the People's Department on our Farm Week website. That's farmweek.msucares.com. You can also watch Farm Week stories on YouTube and Facebook. We'll also have a link to the Market to Market website where you can see the story as well as read the script. That's farmweek.msucares.com. And Leighton, I don't think we can overstate what this has meant to the world, because I mean, people come and study our ag department system, the extension service system, because of the way it got the information out and made America an agricultural powerhouse. Well, we are at the end of Farm Week for this week. On our next show, year-round tomatoes.
A brother and sister act are the driving force behind St. Bethany Fresh of Pontotoc, Mississippi. In their first year of production, St. Bethany boasts a 12,000-foot greenhouse with 3,000 plants.
In Southern Gardening, the ornamental sweet potato. They come in many colors and leaf types, and you're bound to find one you like. For the rest of the Farm Week crew, I'm Artis Ford.
And I'm Leighton Spann. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.